When Florida State law professor Dan Markel was murdered in 2014, he was in the middle of a nasty custody battle with his wife, Wendy Adelson, who is the daughter of a prominent and very wealthy South Florida family. Markel was shot in his driveway. His wife, who was an obvious potential suspect, had an alibi. Eventually, investigators arrested and tried this couple, Katherine Magbanua and Sigfredo Garcia. Prosecutors believe Garcia killed Markel for the Adelson family and that Magbanua set it all up.
She wasn't involved. She doesn't have the answers that people want her to have.
At trial, Katherine Magbanua denied knowing anything about the murder.
Did you have anything to do with the murder of Dan Markel?
No, ma'am.
But prosecutors believe that Magbanua is the connection between Garcia, the trigger man, and the Adelson family because she was previously in a relationship with Wendy Adelson's brother, Charlie, who had even once joked about hiring a hitman to kill Dan Markel.
Do you ever joke about he looked into hiring a hitman, but buying you a TV as a divorce present would be cheaper?
He did make that joke.
The jury found Garcia guilty of murder but couldn't come to a unanimous decision on Katherine Magbanua. If Magbanua wasn't involved, Charlie Adelson would have had to have hired Garcia on his own, which prosecutors say is unlikely because they didn't know each other.
I am 100% convinced that Charlie Adelson somehow contacted Sigfredo Garcia without letting Katherine know.
Part of that deal was Charles Adelson breaking up with Katherine so that Sigfredo could get back the woman that he loved so much.
None of the Adelsons, who prosecutors clearly believe were involved, have yet been charged in Dan Markel's murder. Katherine Magbanua, meanwhile, remains in jail, waiting her retrial.
The thing about this case is that the theory of prosecutors, it's a murder for hire, but they've never charged the people that they believe hired the murderers. It's baffling to me. But I want to bring in a special guest we have tonight, joining us from Redwood City, California, a friend of Dan Markel's and a former law professor at the University of Georgia. Jason Solomon is with us tonight. Jason, thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Vinnie, and for covering this really tragic case.
You know, we've covered the trial. We'll cover the retrial as well. But one thing that I don't think we got a great feel for was Dan. And I know you were good friends with him. I know he was a brilliant legal mind. But can you tell us a little bit more so we understand who Dan Markel was?
Sure. Yeah, Dan was a terrific guy. I got to know him first as we were law professors together. So he was really a person who believed in ideas and research and scholarship and how to make the legal system better. He was devoted to his students. He was a great teacher. He sent folks from Florida State out into the world to work at places all over the state of Florida. He was such a devoted father to his two young boys. He wanted to spend every minute with them, didn't want to miss a minute with them, and really loved them so much. He was a proud Jew, and he was a great and generous friend. So I really miss him.
You know, in covering this story and the trial and the upcoming retrial, I'm still baffled about prosecutors in this case, where they have never charged the people they believe hired the murderers in this case. I don't understand it. Do you think we'll ever get to the point where someone from the Adelson family may be indicted?
Yes, we will. We absolutely will. And I think what's happened here, and I understand why you and others are baffled. I've been baffled at points myself. But I think what's happening here is the state attorney, Jack Campbell, and the lead prosecutor, George Kappelman in Tallahassee, are following a kind of a tried and true, careful strategy of going after the lower level people in the criminal enterprise and then getting them to cooperate on the people above them in the criminal enterprise. So they've got the two hitmen behind bars. They're working on Ms. Magbanua, as you pointed out. And then I think eventually they'll go after particularly Charlie Adelson and Donna Adelson, the brother-in-law of Dan and the mother-in-law of Dan. There's the most evidence against them. There's more than sufficient. There's overwhelming evidence that they were part of this conspiracy to murder Dan. And so I'm confident that the prosecutors will go after them eventually. But we also need to support the prosecutors and let the prosecutors know, we're going to be behind you when you go after them. And so that's what we're trying to do.
Absolutely. You know, I think the one problem, though, now with Katherine Magbanua is she could never testify for the state because she's already testified in her own trial and under oath said she had nothing to do with this. So I don't think that's ever going to happen. Do you?
I think it's highly unlikely. I think you're right. She's demonstrated, number one, that that she's not planning on cooperating, and number two, yeah, since she lied on the stand already, it's not clear how much her testimony would be worth. The good news is there is plenty of evidence to charge at least the two Adelsons I mentioned, Charlie and Donna, with conspiracy. Let's remember, in conspiracy, as with many crimes, if not all crimes, you don't have to have direct evidence, right? You don't have to have someone saying, oh, yeah, Charlie Adelson, Donna Adelson told me to murder that person. You can have circumstantial evidence, and here we've got plenty. We've got the cell phone records that show the phone calls back and forth between Donna and Charlie and Magbanua and the hitman that morning and at other key times. We've got the payments right after the murder from the Adelson dental practice, signed by the mother-in-law, Donna Adelson, to Katie Magbanua. She didn't have a job at the dental practice. Why is she getting these checks then? So, jurors, I believe, at the end of the day are smart. They understand that there's no other possible explanation for this murder except the Adelson family was behind it. And that's why ultimately I believe the prosecutors will go forward and they will get convictions against at least Charlie and Donna Adelson, possibly other members of the family as well.
And we will continue to track it and see how it all develops. Jason Solomon, thank you so much for being on the program. We really appreciate it. And I'm so sorry for your loss of your good friend, Dan Markel.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.